Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lesson, in order to create our session ID, we're going to be using some core Node APIs that are callback based. The first thing that we're going to do is to convert these callback based APIs into promise based so that we can write more maintainable code, and on a future lesson so that we can leverage the Node async await mechanism that is available here in this version of TypeScript that will allow us to write asynchronous code that looks and feels like a synchronous program. In order to do that, the first thing that we're going to need is a promise version of this API, the crypto.randomBytes API, which takes here a callback, but we need to transform this into a version that takes a number of bytes only and not the second argument and returns a promise so that we can pass that on to async await and create the type of node code that it reads like it's synchronous code, but actually everything is happening asynchronous, just like it's happening here with these callbacks. In order to do that, we are going to create here a utility file. We are going to call it security.utils. So this will contain security related utility functions that will be common to multiple parts of the program. We are going to import here the Node crypto module that contains the randomBytes API, and we're going to import here the Util module as well. This Util module is available since version 8, and it contains a function that it's called util.promisify, and this function, like the name suggests, is going to take as input a node function that has a standard node callback API, such as, for example, crypto.randomBytes. This is a function that has the typical node callback based API where the last argument is the callback function, and the callback function, the first argument is the error. So this Promisify function, it's going to take a function that corresponds to this standard convention of a node callback, and what it's going to do, Promisify, it's going to return here a new version of this function, which is promise based instead of callback based. So we are going to call it randomBytes. We are going to keep the same name, and what we have here is a promise based version of this randomBytes callback based utility. So to better understand what we did, let's see how the original crypto.randomBytes utility function would be used. So we would pass in here how many bytes we want to generate, and the second argument and the last argument would be a callback that would receive first the error and then here the pseudo-random number that was generated. So here we would have the random number available in this callback. And here we could do something like console.log, and we could use the number that was generated. Now, as we know, this type of API would tend to get nested very quickly. So this randomBytes function here, this will be a promise-based version of the crypto randomBytes API. So if we call randomBytes, this is not going to take a callback. This is going to return a promise. So if we want to receive the value, the numeric value that was created here, we can by passing in here a function to the then block. So if the promise gets resolved successfully, that is, if the callback gets invoked without any error, we're going to receive here the random number that was generated, and we're going to be able to output it here to the console. If something goes wrong, we can catch the error and do some error handling here. So the error that we would receive here is the same error that would be passed to the node callback. So we could add here our error handling inside this inline function. So this is what util.promisify is doing. It's a utility available since Node 8. It converts functions with this type of node callback API into an equivalent function with a promise-based API instead. And having all our synchronous functions in promise form is the first step for being able to leverage the async await node functionality. Let's have a look at it in action.